Hello, well, my name is Andy Silvers, and Nvidia just released a few new GPUs. Alright, so Nvidia just sort of quietly, semi-secretly released a couple of new Workstation GPUs. I'm not going to be talking about the 3090 Ti or 3080 Ti or whatever. I'm talking about Nvidia's Workstation class GPUs, namely the A series. So, for those who don't know, Nvidia makes graphics cards for both sort of gamers and professional content creators and developers. And for content creators, they have their A series, which includes GPUs like the A6000, A5000, A2000. So Nvidia also has a whole nother series of GPUs for even what you might call higher end workstations, otherwise known as servers. These servers, or data center GPUs, are also part of an A series, which stands for Ampere, which refers to the architecture. And these include the A100, A40, A30, and A2, among a few others. So Nvidia has released 2 or 3 new GPUs in the past few months, and 1 GPU in the past, I'm not sure exactly, but probably past week or so. So these GPUs are the A series. That's what I'm going to focus on. And the GPU in question is the recent A5500. So the A5500 GPU is Nvidia's latest workstation GPU. It is basically a cranked up version of the A5000. And we're going to talk about it a little bit today, and we're going to talk about Nvidia's A series lineup, sort of give a general overview. So Nvidia appears to have about, let's see here, 8 to 9-ish cards, graphics cards available for the Ampere-based workstation market. Now, one of the key things that makes these GPUs for workstations and not servers is the way that they're cooled and also the way that they connect to the PC. So the A series for workstations, or as Nvidia calls it their, let's see here, RTX graphic solutions. This series has 2 main features. First, they all have a fan, an active cooling fan, and they all have 1, even though the higher end tiers probably should have at least 2. But there's a reason for them to have 1. And the second thing is they all have display outputs. So the A2000 only has mini display ports, and the A4000 and up all have full-size display ports, and I believe no HDMI outs on any of them because they're intended for workstations, and I guess DisplayPort 1.4 is the standard for that. Speaking of the data center GPUs, however, these have a similar architecture in many cases to the A5000, 4000, etc., except the data center GPUs, A, don't have an active fan. They have no fan on them at all. And B, only one of them, to my knowledge, actually has a display output of any kind. And I didn't even know this till recently, but if you look at it, the Nvidia A40 actually has 3 DisplayPort outputs that are apparently deactivated by default. So they don't do anything out of the box. You have to activate them. But other than that, none of them, as far as I can tell, have any display outputs because they're simply designed to be put in a server with a whole bunch of other GPUs and used for their compute capabilities alone. They don't expect the user of the data center GPU to actually plug it into just a desktop at home and run a display to their monitor. That's just not what they expect you to do with it. They expect, for instance, visual effects companies to build a GPU server and put, like, I don't know, 24 of these all in one large server to give them potentially hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of VRAM for server applications. However, in the more professional desktop world, they have the A series. And so let's go through this real quick. In the A series, they have the A2000, the A4000, the A4500, the A5000, the A5500, which is the newest one, and the A6000. So the first thing I want to note is that these new GPUs, the A series, which means the Ampere architecture, are intended to replace the Quadro RTX line from last year, or really a year and a half ago. The Quadro RTX line included things like the RTX 8000, 6000, 5000, and 4000. However, Nvidia has simplified the lineup in some sense by getting rid of the 8000 number and just having it be 6, 5, 4, and 2. And if you've ever heard of the Nvidia RTX A3000, that's because that is a mobile-only GPU. I actually have that in my laptop, but that's not something that Nvidia makes as a desktop GPU with a PCI Express 16X slot. You can't put that in a desktop because it doesn't exist as a desktop GPU. Anyway, the A2000 is the lowest in one, and it recently came out with a second version, which is exactly the same as the original, but has 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM, which is rather impressive. And in fact, all of these have GDDR6 VRAM, which is pretty good. It is interesting, though, because this VRAM is not as fast as it could be. There's two options NVIDIA could have chosen in order to have faster VRAM, which would include the GDDR6X VRAM found in the 3090 and 3090 Ti, for instance, or the VRAM that is found in the data center / server GPUs, not all of them, but a lot of the higher end ones, which is called HBM or HBM2 memory. That memory stands for high bandwidth memory, so it's just extremely high speed video memory. None of that is to be found in the A series, at least not the Workstation series. The A series used to include a pretty straightforward lineup, A2000, 4000, 5000, 6000. Right? Pretty easy to count. But now, NVIDIA has decided to create some in-betweeners. So they now have the RTX A4500, which is basically sits right, as you might expect, sits right between the 5000 and the 4000. It has 20 gigabytes of VRAM and a number of CUDA cores and RT cores that sit somewhere between the 5000 and the 4000. However, the one I want to talk about real quick is the A5500, which is kind of new and unique. So the A5500 is the closest GPU to the RTX 3090 that isn't a 3090. It has the same amount of VRAM, 24 gigs. However, it is not the GDDR6X, it's just GDDR6, but still fairly fast. And the updated GPU, the A5500, has more CUDA cores, more tensor cores, more ray tracing cores, and more tensor performance across the board than the A5000. So, however, it does not have more VRAM, and it also does not, I believe it does not have more wattage. No, it's the same, 230 watt power draw for both of the GPUs. So let's take a look. The A5500 has 10,200 CUDA cores. And let me look real quick here for the RTX 3090. And the 3090 has 10,496. So it is very close in terms of CUDA cores. Both the 3090 and 3090 Ti, for that matter, and A5500 are the same 384-bit memory interface. Now, it is safe to say across the board that for a lot of tasks, the 3090 and of course 3090 Ti will be extremely powerful, and in a lot of cases will beat the A5500, which by the way also costs quite a bit more. I actually don't have the exact pricing at this point. I tried to find it. So it depends on who you get it from, but I'm not exactly sure on the pricing. But the RTX 3090 is definitely very expensive, at close to $2,000 on average depending on where you get it from. Remember, the GPU shortage is still sort of ongoing. So the A5500 is purpose-built for desktop applications, and the server versions of these are purpose-built for servers. The idea behind these GPUs is that they're not supposed to consume the 400 plus watts that the 3090 consumes. These Ampere-based RTX cards are designed to be reliable, consistent, and have certified drivers for certain types of programming, designing, CAD, etc. So the reason these GPUs have only one fan is because the one fan is intended to basically pull air through the side and exhaust it through the front, I believe it is. So it's very much one direction. Air comes in, air goes out. It doesn't move around a bunch inside the case. And this is even way more true for the data center GPU. The way that data center GPUs are typically cooled is, remember, they have no fan in them. So it's actually the actual server unit itself, the server rack, has probably dozens of fans blowing through the entire operation and pushing air physically through and across the heat sink of these data center GPUs in order to cool them. The A5500 saves on power by not having quite as fast a memory, by not having quite as fast of a overall architecture, so that it can be more reliable and more consistent and take up less power. Because in a data center or even in a workstation, if you have a bunch of these GPUs all pulling 400 plus watts, you're going to be consuming more power than a lot of systems can handle and not really necessarily getting better performance. Remember that gaming pushes the GPU constantly. It's constantly having to push out 60 plus FPS per second. But for rendering, for animation, it's not always pushing something every second. It does get breaks. And so having more RAM, more VRAM, so it can store large files and large amounts of data for rendering purposes is actually more valuable. So that's the idea behind the RTX A5500. And I discovered this GPU on accident because Nvidia, so far as I'm aware, didn't really talk about it or announce it. It just kind of came out of nowhere. It's a really great GPU and a GPU that I haven't seen made available in workstations. And it's the same story with the A4500, which is also a cheaper and really high quality alternative as well, with 20 gigs of VRAM. These GPUs are so new that they haven't been incorporated with a lot of the OEM partners of Nvidia, like Lenovo, who has a bunch of workstations. Dell has workstations, HP has workstations, and even a lesser-known company, System76, which makes Linux-based workstations, which you should check out, by the way. None of these desktop computer manufacturers have integrated even the option for the A5500 or A4500 Ampere-based GPUs because they're too new. So if these GPUs hit that sweet spot for your workflow, you'll need to purchase them separately from either Dell's website, maybe Newegg's website, or potentially Amazon. These GPUs can be difficult to find, however. However, Dell is actually the most reliable at having even the server GPUs, the data center GPUs. Dell's website actually sells most of them, which is pretty cool. They are incredibly expensive. The Nvidia A100 80 gigabyte model, which is ludicrous, I believe is around $19,000. So you can either get a car or a GPU. But if you're an animator, renderer, or you're compiling a bunch of code or trying to solve mathematical or scientific problems, it is a perfect GPU for that workflow. So let me know what you think about NVIDIA's data center / workstation GPUs. Are you aware that there is even an A5500 or A4500? What do you think about these GPUs? And are you the kind of person who would rather have a workstation GPU or would you rather get a GeForce GPU knowing that it'll perform similarly and maybe even better in certain applications? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to discuss this with you. In the meantime, my name is Andy Silvers. I am an author. Please check out links to my books. They're in the video description. I write books for children's, teens, and adults. Every age range. There's something down there for you. Check it out. Please help support the channel. Like, subscribe. I will see you in the next video.